Welcome to week 3 of Healthcare Signals That Matter. With me, Meghana Arun Pillai, powered by Intent.Health. AI is rapidly becoming embedded into healthcare infrastructure. Public health preparedness is once again dominating national attention. Drug pricing pressure continues to intensify. Healthcare regulation is becoming more aggressive and more political. And healthcare innovation, especially around obesity, oncology, diagnostics, and precision medicine, continues accelerating at extraordinary speed. This week also revealed something very important. Healthcare is no longer just about treatment. It is becoming a real-time intersection of AI policy, consumer behavior, capital markets, regulation, litigation, and public trust. Let's break down the signals that mattered this week. Segment 1 of the week: Public Health, Outbreaks, and Health Security. Story 1 of the week: US moves to curb Ebola risk. The US government announced new efforts to curb Ebola risk while emphasizing that immediate public risk remains low. The signal: post-COVID outbreak preparedness systems are now operating permanently in the background of healthcare infrastructure. Story 2 of the week: flawed testing allowed Ebola spread undetected. Reports reveal that flawed testing and burial practices allowed Ebola spread to go undetected. The signal: healthcare systems are only as strong as their weakest operational processes. Diagnostics, surveillance, reporting accuracy, and field-level healthcare coordination are becoming strategic priorities. Story 3 of the week: the CDC confirmed that one American tested positive for Ebola. The signal: localized outbreaks can now instantly become global healthcare monitoring events. Story 4 of the week: Ebola cases rises. US restricts entry points. The US began routing returning Americans through Washington Dulles Airport as Ebola cases increased. The signal: healthcare response is becoming increasingly centralized, coordinated, and logistics driven. Story 5 of the week: US doctor exposed to Ebola hospitalized abroad. A US doctor exposed to Ebola was hospitalized in the Czech Republic. The signal: healthcare crises are global operational networks now, not isolated national events. Story 6 of the week: hantavirus death reported in Colorado. A Colorado adult reportedly died from hantavirus. The signal: public health communication remains one of healthcare's most critical capabilities post-COVID. Segment 2 of the week: AI, data, and healthcare intelligence. Story 7 of the week: Commure reaches $7 billion valuation. Healthcare AI company Commure reached a $7 billion valuation following new funding. The signal: capital continues flowing aggressively toward healthcare AI infrastructure. Story 8 of the week: Bristol Myers deploys Anthropic's Claude AI. Bristol Myers announced the use of Anthropic's Claude AI to accelerate drug discovery. The signal: AI is rapidly moving from experimentation into core pharmaceutical workflows. Story 9 of the week: US HHS launches AI fraud detection initiative. The US Health Department launched an AI initiative focused on fraud and waste detection. The signal: government themselves are now adopting AI as operational healthcare infrastructure. Segment 3 of the week: GLP-1, obesity, and consumer healthcare. Story 10 of the week: Lilly's next-generation obesity drug shows 28% weight loss. Eli Lilly announced patients lost up to 28% body weight on its next-generation obesity drug. This may be one of the most important healthcare market signals of the year. The obesity economy is expanding far beyond treatment. It now impacts wellness, nutrition, retail health, employer healthcare, insurance economics, consumer behavior, and longevity markets. Story 11 of the week. Trump RX expands generic drug offerings. Trump announced Trump RX would offer 600 generic drugs. The signal: consumer-facing healthcare pricing disruption is accelerating. Story 12 of the week. Supreme Court rejects pharma challenge to drug pricing law. The US Supreme Court rejected a pharmaceutical industry challenge to federal drug price negotiations. The signal: drug pricing pressure is no longer temporary. It is becoming structural. Story 13 of the week. Takeda found guilty of delaying generic competition. A jury found Takeda guilty of delaying generic drug competition. The signal: antitrust scrutiny in pharma is intensifying rapidly. Segment 4 of the week. Healthcare regulation and political healthcare. Story 14 of the week. RFK Jr. removes preventive health panel members. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. removed members from a major preventive health panel. The signal: healthcare regulation and public health governance are becoming increasingly politicized. Story 15 of the week. Rhode Island hospital ordered to release transgender care records. A court allowed a Rhode Island hospital to release transgender care records to Texas investigators. The signal: healthcare providers increasingly operate across conflicting legal environments. Story 16 of the week. Families consider relocating for gender-affirming care. Families are reportedly considered moving states to preserve access to gender-affirming care. The signal: healthcare access itself is becoming geographically fragmented. Story 17 of the week. Senator Durbin urges stronger vape restrictions. Senator Dick Durbin urged RFK Jr. not to ease vape restrictions. The signal: youth-focused healthcare regulation is intensifying again, especially around nicotine products. Segment 5 of the week. Healthcare capital markets and M&A. Story 18 of the week. Berkshire Hathaway exits United Health position. United Health shares fell after Berkshire Hathaway sold its stake. The signal: healthcare investors are becoming more selective around payer economics and long-term healthcare cost trends. Story 19 of the week. Elliott builds stake in Biorad. Activist investor Elliott built a significant stake in Biorad Laboratories. The signal: healthcare diagnostics and life sciences infrastructure remain highly valuable strategic assets. Story 20 of the week. Boston Scientific invests $1.5 billion in Mirus. Boston Scientific invested $1.5 billion into heart valve company Mirus. The signal: cardiovascular innovation remains one of healthcare's strongest investment categories. Story 21 of the week. Medtronic acquires SPR Therapeutics. Medtronic announced plans to acquire SPR Therapeutics for $650 million. The signal: device companies are aggressively expanding into pain management and neuromodulation. Segment 6 of the week. Drugs, diagnostics, and therapeutic innovation. Story 22 of the week. Pfizer vaccine shows strong trial results. Pfizer's pneumococcal vaccine produced strong mid-stage results. The signal: vaccine competition remains highly active beyond COVID. Story 23 of the week. FDA to review Moderna flu vaccine. The FDA will hold an expert meeting reviewing Moderna's flu vaccine. The signal: mRNA technology expansion beyond COVID remains a major healthcare focus. Story 24 of the week. FDA approves gully drug for deadly liver infection. The FDA approved a gully treatment for a deadly liver infection. The signal: specialty infectious disease therapies remain high priority approval pathways. Story 25 of the week. Asthma drug may improve cancer immunotherapy. Researchers found a common asthma drug may improve cancer immunotherapy effectiveness. The signal, drug repurposing is becoming one of the fastest paths towards scalable innovation. Story 26 of the week. Early childhood screening for type 1 diabetes shows promise. New research suggests early childhood screening for type 1 diabetes could significantly improve outcomes. The signal, healthcare is steadily shifting from reactive care toward predictive and preventive medicine. Segment 7 of the week. Healthcare trust, safety, and social impact. Story 27 of the week. Nestle and Danone face baby formula scrutiny. Nestle and Danone face scrutiny over baby formula recalls. The signal, healthcare adjacent consumer brands now face much higher safety and transparency expectations. Story 28 of the week. Meta settles youth mental health case. Meta settled a US case tied to youth mental health related school costs. The signal, technology companies are increasingly being held accountable for downstream mental health impact. Story 29 of the week. Minnesota nonprofit fraud case leads to 41-year sentence. A Minnesota nonprofit leader received a 41-year sentence tied to a $250 million fraud scheme. The signal, fraud enforcement in healthcare adjacent programs is intensifying significantly. So, what were the signals that mattered this week? AI is rapidly becoming embedded into healthcare infrastructure. Public health preparedness is once again becoming a national priority. Drug pricing pressure is intensifying. Healthcare access is becoming increasingly political and geographically fragmented. Healthcare fraud enforcement is accelerating. And healthcare innovation continues moving aggressively toward predictive care, precision medicine, AI-driven discovery, preventive healthcare, and consumer-driven healthcare models. But perhaps the biggest signal this week is this. Healthcare is no longer reacting to change. It is now continuously operating inside change. And in that kind of environment, the organizations that identify signals early will move ahead of the market. This is Meghana Arun Pillai, and you are watching Healthcare Signals That Matter, powered by Intent.Health. See you next week.